4-stars in Genshin Impact have always been a mixed bag. Even in the Fontaine era, we've gotten some absolute winners like Chevres and Gaming, and then some fellows who are just trying their best like Fremine, but I'd argue that the quality of 4-stars on the whole has definitely improved since the dark ages of Sumeru. Speaking of which, do you remember when all 4-stars just sucked for a while? Well, today, I aim to remind you all of those forgotten units and explain why exactly they aged so poorly. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. A quick disclaimer, if you like the 4-stars in this video, great, good for you. Naturally, play who you like. I still play my Venti and Ganyu in 2024, and you can ultimately make these units work if you'd like. I invite you to discuss your own thoughts and feelings down below in the comments. I'm also leaving Farazan and Yao Yao out of this video because while they came out during Sumeru, both of them are good in my opinion, especially Farazan. Kirara has also always been pretty decent in my opinion, so she's also safe from the list of shame. Okay, let's go. Let's go in order of when these guys came out, starting with one of the better units on this list, honestly. Now, to be fair, I will be reasonable with Collei. She came out at a time where we barely had any Dendro units, and since she is free, she was the perfect candidate to utilize for experimentation with the, at the time, new Dendro element. But it was pretty clear that the moment we got upgrades, she'd fall off fast, and that's essentially what happened. First off, her range. Collei's burst launches out a field of Dendro application, but it's small, man. Even smaller than Bennett's Circle, which is tragic, and we already complain a lot about Circle Impact. In Abyss, it's always very valuable if a character can carry their buff wherever you go, like Farina's fanfare and Three Little Guys teleporting over to whoever you attack next, even if they're on the opposite side of the field. Yolande's wrapping damage bonus is also very good in this regard, since the dice is always following her active character, and if you're playing a main DPS that has a lot of movement in their kit, like Clorand, then they really hate supports that restrict you into a small area. To be fair, Collei's Circle is more about applying to the enemy, but you still encounter multi-wave issues. It also only applies a measly 3 ticks of Dendro. Yikes, this kid keeps getting handed L's left, and left. Not even any rights, because that just ain't right! Worst joke I've made in the history of existing. Alright, let's move on before my foolishness comes off of cooldown. But her Dendro application is strong, right? Well, about that. Hoyo bricked Collei even more by providing her with a special Dendro application ICD that no other unit has, because they clearly love her so much. For the uninitiated, ICD stands for internal cooldown, and a character's ICD on their elemental application is the time it takes or the amount of hits it takes to apply an element. A quote-unquote standard ICD would be applying a moderate amount of element every 3 hits, or once every 2.5 seconds. Collei's burst applies Dendro once every 3 seconds, and while that 0.5 second difference may seem small, it's what makes her Dendro application so slow and unimpressive. Not to mention how Collei also simply just doesn't have the 3-hit rule. Also, her burst only lasts 6 seconds, so that's 2 hits of Dendro application. Now, you can extend this to a whopping 3 if you trigger a Dendro reaction while standing inside that tiny circle generated by her burst. This is because of her A4, which extends her burst by 3 seconds if you do the aforementioned, and extending her burst to 9 seconds allows for that extra hit. Yeah, good luck trying to keep your quick fire Clorand or your quick swapping Hyperbloom team within that tiny field. She also basically does nothing else aside from Dendro application, and she's been power crept in that department time and time again. Her only claim to fame is being free, but, so is DMC, and they provide a way larger range of Dendro application with a standard ICD. The only argument there is if you're playing Bloom and need 2 different Dendro units because you don't have Nahida yet, and Yao Yao isn't an option. To that, I say fair enough, because I feel like people often forget that banners do take months at a time to return, and sometimes free options are all you've got. And I say that Collei is one of the better characters being talked about in this video, because she's really decent and free to play Bloom, and sticking her on a sacrificial bow lets her launch off her skill twice for more Dendro application. You can really easily form a Nilou team as a new player with Barbara, Nilou, Collei, and DMC. And honestly, I feel like considering the cheapness of this team and the performance it provides for said cheapness, Nilou is seriously slept on as a player's first potential limited 5-star. Every 4-star character in this team is free, and Collei contributes to this, therefore meaning that she does have some value. But in any other situation, poor girl was already dead on arrival, since DMC is the larger range of Dendro application that is approaching, trapping Collei in isolation. Dori's an interesting one. I don't even think that her kit is beyond saving or anything. Being an electro driver that provides you with energy is not a bad idea at all, and self-applying elements can lead to some silly interactions, as we've seen via Bennett's burst self-applying pyro being able to lead to elemental interactions like Jean Sunfire. The problem more lies in the fact that in every situation that Dori could slot into, she is outclassed, even to this day. For example, Raiden Shogun completes Dori's primary role with damage on top. Most players will have a Raiden too, because most of y'all are simps, be honest. And while you may think that many play her on a Hyper Bloom build nowadays, you'd be mistaken. Take a look at this. Plus, Raiden adds a bunch of damage on top of her utility, and her skill provides a burst damage bonus to the whole team. Obviously, it's unfair to compare a random 4-star driver to a 5-star Archon driver, but even if Raiden can't cook, she definitely got her license first, even before Blade did, so Dori just ends up feeling redundant as an electro driver. Fischl is one of the most flexible characters in the game and will fulfill all your "I need a random electro here" needs perfectly well. She's also famously known for her batterying, so that's another point off of Dori, who's also supposed to be pretty good at batterying. She can heal, so that's something she has over the other two, being a Farina driver. Yeah, that's great and all, but there's like 50 billion other healers who are simply better for the job. So while I honestly think that Dori's kit isn't even that bad, especially at C6 when she can drive and heal at the same time, you simply have no reason to choose Dori over all the others, unless your only reasoning is quite literally just not having the others, which, once again, fair enough. What I will say about Candace is that, while on release she was not that great, she's definitely gotten better. I think Candace's issue is similar to Collei's, in the sense that she's simply just never best in slot and there's almost always a better option to use over her. Back when she came out, I'd say she had two main uses, and then she gained one pretty good use later on. She could have Xingqiu Hydro-infuse his normals to drive a funky Hyper Bloom team, or allow Yao Yao to have Hydro-infuse normals when playing in Nilou Bloom, and later on, she was found to have great synergy in AoE Arlecchino Vape. I feel like when most people think about Candace, they immediately turn to her Hydro Infusion and forget that she actually has damage bonus percent buffing mechanics, a neat 20% in her burst. Yep, trust me, I'm guilty of this too, so you'd think she'd be good, right? Well, unfortunately, Candace's damage bonus only applies to normal attacks, not to mention how in her best teams, being core-based Dendro teams, namely Bloom, damage bonus is virtually useless. It's pretty much only utilized by Arlecchino, but it's worth noting that Candace released in 3.1 and Arlecchino in 4.6. Having to wait over a year and a half for one decent use case is insane. Plus, most of her normal attack DPSs like Wanderer or Yoimiya simply have other buffer options that are stronger and more consistent for their given teams. Shoot, Yun Jin seriously gives Candace's buff a run for its money if NA percent is what you're specifically after. Candace's buff is also 9 seconds at base and becomes 12 seconds at C1, so you want to use her buff as late as possible in a rotation so you can use as much of it as you can. Yet Bennett also wants to have his buff utilized for as much time as possible and tends to provide a truckload more value in any team you slot him into, where Candace could also potentially work. So, not a bad kit per se, there's simply just no reason to utilize Candace in particular. Oh boy, this guy. I've already made an entire video dogging on him and his flaws, so I'll try to keep this section a little more brief and recap the key points that make him garbage. And unlike the previous units in this video, you have zero justifiable reason to run Kaveh over anyone else. He works against transformative reactions, which is what both Blooms and Bountiful Cores are. These kind of reactions can only deal damage 2 times per enemy within 0.5 seconds. Kaveh detonates all Blooms at the same time due to his skill, as you can see here, which means that Kaveh spawns way more Blooms than what those 2 damage instances per 0.5 seconds allow. So those extra Blooms are being wasted, and they won't give you any extra damage. Not to mention his slow Dendro application thanks to being a Claymore, even with C2 factored in, how he actively nerfs the team DPS of all your Bloom teams no matter what, and how you want to pair him with Nilou if you want him to even attempt clearing in a reasonable time, defeating the whole purpose of the guy's existence. On-fielding literally anybody else in a Bloom team is better for your team overall, and he ruins the fluid rotation of Bloom while offering nearly nothing at all in return. Some mediocre buffing, I guess. Yeah, nice 30 to 50% Bloom damage bonus when Nilou provides up to 300 to 400% on average. My man works against the team comp he was supposed to help. This guy literally has worse luck than Bennett. Dare I say, one of the worst 4-stars of all time, because he is one of the only characters in the game who just does not have a place in my opinion. He makes his best in slot team, supposedly, worse, and he can't even drive Hyper Bloom because he detonates the Bloom cores before they can get affected with Electro. Yikes. I don't want to go too hard on Layla because her low-ranking position in the meta honestly isn't her fault. If you're in need of a shielder, yeah, she gets the job done fine, but I'm still including her because outside of Wanderer teams, you basically never see her being used. This is more due to Cryo being a super mid element, and I seriously hope Notline can buff it in some way, shape, or form. You'd almost always rather run Rosaria or Charlotte if it's a freeze team, and Diona already exists, so it's not like Layla's Cryo shielder niche is anything fresh and new. There simply is never a reason to choose Layla. I suppose the upcoming Imaginarium Theater will feature Cryo, in which case sure, Layla has a place. Otherwise, in actually hard Abyss content, there's very little that Layla in particular can offer you that any other Cryo 4-star can't do better or substitute for something more valuable. Especially now that we have Charlotte and are living in the Farina meta, healers are typically more valued over shielders now, unless you're fighting a really annoying boss that staggers you all the time like the Copper Duo. There's also other fun team formats of Charlotte like Nuvi Freeze, which work specifically because of how her Cryo marks work, applying Cryo while Nuvi blasts Hydra onto the enemies from far away. Also, it didn't help that, even on release, Layla came out during the Dendro era, in which the closest thing to a Cryo Dendro team was goddamn Fridge. Otherwise, Cryo was even more irrelevant back then compared to even now, as the Dendro meta had taken over at the time, and there's no true Cryo and Dendro interactions, meaning that Layla pretty much just suffers from I exist syndrome. Mika is good now. I'm hesitant to even discuss him right now. It might be better to just stick him up with Farzan and Yao Yao, because Farina made him actually decent. Also, many of my comments on the Farina healers ranking video that I did told me about how Mika also works really nicely with Rio Farina teams. But on release, Mika was pretty terrible, so I'll instead talk about how he used to be useless. But note that nowadays, Mika has good use cases thanks to Farina, and I'm mostly including him because he sucked on release, meanwhile Farzan and Yao Yao have always been pretty good. When Mika came out, he buffed a very niche stat, attack speed. There wasn't many characters who wanted this, and outside of that he healed, and pre-Farina, it's either be solid for Bloom teams, otherwise your healing isn't that needed. Healers that can do multiple things other than just that are always more well-rounded characters, as opposed to characters who have that as their only main gimmick. His C6 gave him the ability to really buff up crit for physical DPSs. Cough cough everybody, Yola. Yet a C6 Rosaria's physical res shred was so damn solid that they were basically on par, so Yola got a minuscule upgrade at best at the time. Nowadays, Mika allows Farina usage in Yola teams, which makes him better than a C6 Rosaria, but if you're using Farina elsewhere, then he once again goes back to just being alright in Yola teams. Which sucks, because Farzan for Xiao and Wanderer is such an unbelievable DPS increase, even at C0, even if she's a little clunkier to use at that stage. He kind of failed at what a dedicated support is meant to do, and that's keep a character relevant with rising power levels in the meta. Yola is still as irrelevant as ever, so he definitely didn't succeed in that. But to be honest, I can't blame everything on Mika. Being asked to fix physical in a game inherently about reactions is like asking a chef to renovate a house. What are they supposed to do? Paint it or something? Yola's kit has its own inherent issues, which is a topic of discussion for another day. I'm mostly all just saying this to make it clear that I am aware of how Mika's circumstances weren't the best. It was a tall ask, buddy, but at least you tried. Trademarked. While we definitely do still get some gutters, usually we get much better 4-star characters, and quite a few of these characters did end up finding their place in the meta after some time. But it's crazy to think about how there was a point in time in which 4-star characters were so darn undertuned, new 4-star characters seem to always be synonymous with low quality, maybe being okay to play at C6 if it was a good day in Hoyo's HQ. I'm very glad that Hoyoverse has changed their mind about this, and takes a more experimental approach to their 4-star characters now. It's clear that even for the bad 4-stars, they tried something different, and for the good ones, they tried to raise up the position of something that really needed the help, like Chevreuse fixing Overload for instance. My previous Kaveh video was my main inspiration for making this specific video, and honestly, I still find it wild how his kit even came to pass. Remember to join my Discord and follow my Twitter. Both of those links will be down below in both the pinned comment and description. Also, my Ko-Fi will be in both of those places as well if you're interested in supporting me. I've also recently opened up channel memberships if you want access to some cool emotes. I'll be opening up some more tiers and adding some more perks soon. Hopefully this video was able to take you through that weird time when every 4-star ever seemed to suck. This has been Juice, signing out. Nobody is more of a 4-star than Hydro Traveler. What is this?